Bags of heroin every day. Heroin is a beast, and that beast has infiltrated every town and city in America. In 2016, 64,000 Americans died of an accidental overdose of opioids. I hope that the stories we bring you on this show save lives in 2018. I'm Richie Farrell. I'm a heroin addict. Today for our live show that years ago I shot 10 bags of heroin every day. Heroin is a beast, and that beast has years ago, I shot 10 bags of heroin every day. Heroin is a beast, and that beast has infiltrated every town and city in America. In 2016, 64,000 Americans died of an accidental overdose of opioids. I hope that the stories we bring you on this show save lives in 2018. I'm Richie Farrell. I'm a heroin addict. Okay, I want to thank you very much for joining us today on our live version of I Am a Heroin Addict. Today, we're going to focus on families and addiction. And before I begin, I'm a heroin addict, a recovering heroin addict, a long time. And I've been in recovery a long time. But I got to tell you this story. As I was preparing for this show, on our Facebook page, I put up a book that I had written in 2000 and I think 7 or 8. It came out in 2009, called What's Left of Us. And I offered up for people to watch and to ask questions of our two guests, Bonnie and Matt, on how they dealt with family and addiction. And I was going to have my co-host, Jazz, pick who was what we thought was a great question, and we're going to send this book. And almost immediately, I had someone go on, I'm horrible with names, but the woman put on, is it Suzanne? Suzanne, yeah. Suzanne put on what's left of it. Do you remember the quote she put on? But her son's name is? Cody. Cody. And so I promised that I would bring him up at the beginning of the show and dedicate this show to him. He died 6/30/17 of a, here we go, Jazz. And I put up What's Left of Us. Of course, the book was what a doctor said to me when I was leaving Low Detox. He said, you know, bad things happen to us as human beings. People, you know, people hurt us. If you're human, things are going to happen. We do bad things, all that. But all that matters when you leave here is what's left of us, where we're at. And she put up, I lost it, because I spoke too much, but she put up that, here we go, thanks, Chad. There is nothing left since 6/30/17, forever 28. So we'd like to dedicate this show to her son, Cody. We got a great show in front of her, and I don't want to take too much time talking because my wife tells me I speak too much, and Jazz tells me that now too. I speak too much. But I want to introduce my co-host and really the anchor of this show, all that jazz. Tell us a little bit, tell the audience about yourself, and introduce our wonderful guest sitting on the floor there.
Sure. Thank you, Richie. The anchor, wow. That's not true. So my name is Jasmine. I am a heroin addict, for those of you who haven't been following. I've been in active drug addiction from the age of 14 to 32, so I have been through many trials and tribulations. November 3rd, 2016 is my clean date. I have been clean and sober for 16 months now. And being through on the other end of that, a good portion of my life is dedicated to now giving back. And what I can do to help those who are suffering, and to give back in any way that I can, not even to people that are suffering from this disease, anyone that's suffering in any way. So by fate, I met Richie here, and we just kind of came together, and so we're just doing everything we can to raise awareness and to let people know that there's hope, and that anyone's suffering, that they could reach out to us. And we just came together, and we've been brainstorming ideas, and it's been really good. It's been
fantastic. I mean, fate, when you look at it, I'm not a, you know, I think things happen because they were supposed to. And so the last minute scratch guest, and I made a call that day of the show. And this woman, Chris Perry Long, yes, said, my daughter-in-law or something, and she was traveling back, said, I know this great girl from Bowman. I called you, or I sent you a Bowman, you were on the show, and after the show I said, oh my God, this, I said, what I actually said is, I'm an old white guy in a young epidemic.
You called yourself a junkie.
I was an old, right, I was an old white guy junkie in a young epidemic, and that I needed someone young, and I asked you to be the co-host, and it's just been phenomenal ever since. And without further ado, introduce this, who the hell this is sitting on the floor here.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of fate, Bonnie came into my life by fate. Bonnie and I have known each other for a couple years now, and Bonnie's daughter is a good friend of mine, more like a little sister of mine. When I remember the very first day I met Bonnie, we were standing in the stairwell of a sober living, and I shook her hand, and I remember when you know when you make that connection with someone and your eyes lock and like your souls connect, and I was like, there's something very special, something very unique about this woman, and she has been a part of my journey ever since that day, through all the trials and tribulations. She was there for me when I relapsed and it had hit rock bottom. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Bonnie.
Hey, Bonnie.
Namaste. That means the light in me honors the light in you, and it's an honor and a blessing to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about what you do, your business, and all that good stuff.
Okay, so I'm a mother. I'm a mother of 3 children, and I'm also a wife to my good husband, my husband John, and we have a dog named Cody. I'm also a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, a Reiki master, a whole lot of other modalities, holistic modalities that are helpful in healing just about anything.
Okay, and how do you use this to help with, first of all, let's talk about your family and addiction. Let's talk a little bit about that.
My family's journey with addiction is through my daughter's addiction about the age of 15. It's all kind of, and speaking with my kids, it's kind of like a cluster of things that happen at once. A divorce, a house fire, several unfortunate things happened, and the outcome was that all of us sort of had changes that happened. It was my hope that, you know, when the divorce happened, everything would be shiny and sunny and beautiful, and it is, because we're all here and we're all alive. But the reality is, it's kind of like when you send your child to school and they're really good all day, and then they come home and it's like, ah, you know. So after the divorce, everybody kind of, well, you know, they went their own ways, and the struggles began. But the love is strong, and together we're all doing okay today.
Okay, and so how do you use your, and jump in here at any time you want, how do you use this, this, you know, holistic approach that you have with Reiki and yoga and all that? How do you use that to help families that are struggling with addiction?
Well, yoga is movement. It's breath. It's connecting the mind, the body, and the spirit. One of the things, and I love the 12-step programs, absolutely. One of the modalities I'm trained in, or one of the yogas, is 12-step yoga recovery. y12sr.com if anybody wants to look at that. One of the things that the 12 steps leaves out, Bill W. and his cohort, I don't remember the name, they kind of look at the Yoga Sutras. And the Yoga Sutras are kind of like the book of yoga, and that is where the 12 steps came from. But it's all the same, it's all connected. As is the Serenity Prayer, it's an old prayer, it comes together. So releasing issues from the tissues. So you go to a NAAA, EA, EIO, any kind of A meeting. There's an A for everything. And there's a lot of cognitive-based discussion. And that's all fantastic. There's some spirituality, hopefully a lot of spirituality. But the body, the physical being, kind of gets forgotten. So the mind and body are connected. We have a neck. And the breath is our barometer for how we're doing. If you get kind of, during your day, it's like, that's your body saying, yo, slow down. You need to take some space, maybe take a breath, think about it. So using the breath, connecting the mind and body and the spirit all together. So breathing, mindful movement is just essential to the recovery. A cigarette break, does not equate physical activity or the connection to the body. So that's kind of, there's some groundbreaking science behind that too. I didn't make it up. I kind of wish I did, but I continue to use it. Every single modality that I can use, we use here.
So I think we have a question already, correct? Yeah. We have a question for you from the audience, was Skyped in.
We do. We have a question from Marcia. Can you hear me, Bonnie?
I can, yeah.
Okay, so Marcia says, hello. As a parent of 2 recovering addicts, first of all, we would like to express how proud and blessed we are that they were able to overcome the worst part, getting clean. Our question is, we need to know how to help them with this lifelong struggle to stay clean.
So I think one of the things that I want to mention that maybe I didn't before is that parents, it's so important to realize that we didn't cause this. We can't change it, and we can't control it. So I'm always kind and loving to my daughter and supportive when she's in recovery. I'm always kind and loving to her. When she's out ripping and running, as they say, or using, unfortunately, I'll be there for a check-in, but I can't support that. So to support a sustainable recovery is important, and this is where recovery yoga and holistic modalities really do help. There's a lot of research behind that. So get them into a Y12 class, in addition to their meetings, have them learn about their bodies, get these issues. If you've ever kind of felt yourself being kind of angsty or unable to sit still, there's issues that lay within the tissues. So bringing the mindful movement in will help with the sustainable recovery. It's a good platform for that. And so I think that's Tai Chi if they don't want to do yoga. Not everybody does. I think everybody should, but not everybody does.
So let me. So what I like. I spoke to you earlier this week, and you said something that really struck me because I've used it a lot, and I'm a big believer in. I did Bikram yoga, which is a little different. It's very hot in the room, and I took it as like a challenge, even to stay in the room, and it really did something to me, and I almost became addicted to that in itself. But my point is the breathing. The breathing is so important, and I can't tell you how many times that I've received telephone calls when I was in my apartment in LA, and the people needed to be talked down. They were having a panic attack, and they were, panic attacks when have you had a panic attack? Yeah. When like everything is real, like your brain, I'm nuts. I'm going nuts. Something, and I learned how to breathe through that, and I've talked people into on the phone, so many, and say, okay, now here's what it is. This isn't real. What's happening right now isn't real. It's, so let's breathe. Take a deep breath, right? So let's start. You talked about that, how that you have written curriculum to go into the schools to teach kids, instead of math and, stuff that they may not ever use again in algebra, to teach kids how to deal with their emotion. And I think that might be a connection that we can help as far as dealing with a lifelong of addiction, besides God and the 12 steps and all that stuff. But they're dealing, how we can just teach others to deal with their emotions. So speak on that, the breathing technique for a minute.
There are so many coping techniques that exist. I think that we could tell somebody it's not real, and that's another cognitive-based statement. Yeah. The mind will lie to us all day long, but the body doesn't lie. So I often tell people to get out of their minds and into their bodies. Root and ground. Take a deep breath. And I think another important point here is nobody taught me how to stand up, all four corners of my feet, in mountain pose, grounded. Nobody taught me how to breathe until I came through yoga teacher training. So learning to breathe is very important. Most people inhale and they don't bring in the breath. When you inhale, it's a nice deep breath. Expand the belly, bring it to the heart space, all the way to the brain. And then exhale, belly button to spine, and then release. And when you're inhaling new life, rich prana, is life force. And when you're exhaling, often I'll tell people, get rid of that which no longer serves you, well, I might use a different term, but this is a very good way. There's a mudra that I'll show you, and then I'll show you the breathing technique if you'd like. You can take 2 fingers, your second and third, and plug them into the earth. And then as you inhale, you imagine that you're bringing in everything good that you want in your life right from the earth. And as you exhale, you can just imagine that which no longer serves you. You don't need to name it. Just kind of rolling down your shoulders and going away. So that's a really good way to move this. This is yoga. You do this. This is grounding the left and the right side of the brain. That's hand yoga. So there's a lot of different modalities. Teaching this in schools at young ages is crucial if we're ever going to end this epidemic. We've got to start now.
Okay, so
I don't know the last confused. I saw triangle, but it was a long time ago for me.
So just do you want to say something? Were you going to say that? So just to keep it simple for someone, right, that's watching it, they can't, that's having a panic attack or sitting in a chair, in a car, in a classroom, wherever they may be, right? So what would be like a few steps that would be like, I breathe in, I hold it, I shut my eye, I breathe out. What would be a few steps that we could teach someone to do for 5 minutes that would calm that anxiety and kind of channel it out, that bad energy out of our body? What give us that.
A good thing to do is connect to the earth. The bones.
But if they can't,
sitting bones.
if they can't, if they're sitting in, let's say if a kid, okay, no, but let's just say that if there's someone in a classroom, if there's someone sitting down, there's a lot of people around them, and they're struggling with this addiction that they've got to do, and they can't get up and leave, right? And is there a way to quietly sit there and just focus on something else and like take in deep breaths? Is there something like that we could teach them?
Always, absolutely. They can focus their attention on a drishti, something that doesn't move, and just kind of stare at that and remind themselves where they are. You know, this isn't happening now. I'm here. Just the breath. It's ideal to do this before you get into a panic attack. So the moment the breath becomes a little bit choppy, a little bit too fast, it's a signal. It's our the reptilian brain actually telling us that, hey, something's not right. And most people just ignore and just plow through whatever they're doing. So rather than doing that, the second that your radar shows that something's not right in my life, maybe putting two hands on the heart, taking those breaths will immediately take the anxiety down. It's just remembering to do it.
So how long would they breathe like that? Would they breathe for a while? You know, just
until they felt grounded. And I want to emphasize that the breathing in our is usually backwards. You know, the first thing we do when we're startled is go, you know, and we could bring our bellies in. But in fact, we're supposed to expand the belly, expand the heart space as you inhale, fill up like a balloon almost, and then exhale and release. So that's kind of backwards way. We don't breathe that way. Another important point for us to remember is that trauma is huge. I believe addiction is a symptom of underlying issues, and I think you would probably agree with that.
Oh, man. Yeah. And trauma, to me, there's a lot of things. Trauma, you know, domestic, sexual, all that stuff brings
society.
us anxiety. It brings us.
No, society
Oh,
as
society.
a whole.
Oh,
yeah.
man. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Can you read the question that came in?
It doesn't
Oh, you have.
Yeah, I have it right here,
okay.
but I was going to...
There's a question coming in on our screen, and being old and blind, an old blind junkie.
So I have a question, Bonnie, and I don't know if you will be able to answer it, but try your very best here, okay? Our question comes from Connor. It says, I have a question in regards to medically assisted treatment, MAT programs, as in Suboxone maintenance. I see and believe fully that it is what will be the next big thing in the vast majority of treatment centers. Regardless of what is preferred, I feel to get funded. Treatment centers will probably nearly forced to use this aspect of treatment.
It's up on the board.
So what do you feel about Suboxone or any MAT?
My personal feeling is that it's okay for a while. It's not my first line of defense, but if somebody's tried over and over, they're relapsing, it's not going to kill them like this stuff out in the streets. It's going to sustain them for a while. They get addicted. I've heard that being detoxing from some of these medications is just as bad as heroin or fentanyl or whatever other stuff is out there. But I think it's a better option than sending them back out in the street to use.
The key word that I heard there was for a while. What else would you recommend that someone else do with that?
Well, I think the most important part is that somebody, clearly we know that they need to want it, but because of the nature of this, 184 lives a day, we kind of got to bring the bottom up. I don't believe in this rock bottom stuff because it just doesn't make sense to me to wait till somebody falls down and we're losing people too quickly. So bringing the bottom up, taking time. Addiction is a disease of connection, of disconnection,
right.
As well as spirituality. So I'm also not, although I've had to ask my daughter to leave the home, I would never lost connection. I never didn't. She always knew I loved her. She knows I love her. Thank God I can still say love. And I've always been kind to her. So I believe we should stay connected to our children, be kind to them, and continue to teach them coping skills, how to breathe, how to journal. They can do pictures. It depends on your skills. There are walking meditations you can do. There are silent meditations. There's a whole host of things out there that can be done. It's,
Yeah, I think.
That's not the first thing I would think of.
Yeah, I mean, I think Connor's got a great thing. I mean, how do you feel about abstinence?
Somebody once said it was best, but you mean abstinence from drugs? Sorry.
No, I'm asking. What did she say?
Yes, abstinence from drugs.
Oh, you.
That was a very valid question, though.
That was a great question, yes. But I'm really I was really trying to jump on Connor Hogan's question here. But how do you feel about abstinence?
So I think you're talking about relationships. I think.
No, we're talking about substance-free.
Substance-free. I'm sorry, not abstinence.
Yeah. I mean, every situation is different. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all for anything. Yeah, great. Everybody don't do any more drugs, and if it was that easy, boom, we would have no problem left. I don't think that it's something that's feasible. I think there needs to be a different treatment plan for every single person that walks into a center. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. I can't tell you how many treatment facilities I've walked into that have absolutely gorgeous meditation, yoga rooms, and nobody's in there. Nobody's in there at all. So that kind of is disappointing. Well,
it kind of directly leads to Connor's question. At the end of it there, I can see, because Sarah out there made it real big for me, will they be forced, meaning the treatment center, will they be forced to use it to get funding? And where are you going? And so no, that's okay. So will you be?
I'm not
no.
I have another breath to teach you.
That's okay. Okay. Which I kind of is kind of interesting when you look at it, is that I think the answer is yes.
I think we're already seeing it. Not to get in a political debate here, but I'm already seeing a change in many different treatment centers, which used to be like 12-step base, are going more towards like different program, different structure, where MATs are being offered. And I'm not the person to say whether that's right or wrong. I'm just here to share my experience with that.
See, I so agree. So my belief, and this is only my personal belief, right? It doesn't do any shame or anything to anybody else. This is only Richie. When we're here to help everybody that we can, regardless of which path they choose. I personally believe that addiction is a social problem. That's my thing. I don't think it's. I'm not going to use the D word because it freaks people out when I say it, but I believe that stopping using heroin wasn't the beginning of my recovery. The beginning of my recovery came when I changed my social surroundings, my social status, when I became educated, when I started working out, when I changed the dialogue. Because if I had kept that, and I say this all the time, if I had stayed on methadone, and Suboxone wasn't around, that's how old I am, but if I had stayed on that, I wouldn't have had a career that I've had. So I think that yoga, breathing, all the stuff that we suffer today, just in society, like you were saying, it's an incredible amount of stress brought on us every day, right? All the way. Forget about if you're addicted to anything. Kids growing up, going through puberty, all that, they have to deal with all this crap. And if we could teach them how to breathe and how to realize, then we're starting to focus on that. So we've got a little time left. That's how fast it goes here. But tell us about what you think about what we can do as far as the families, how we can bring your teachings into that to help with the families.
I just need to say that I think that this problem needs to be fixed from the inside out. The first thing that I ask people to do when they come to the studio or come to see me privately for yoga therapy is to fall in love with themselves, fall madly in love with yourself. And that's not easy. I think families should teach people that it's okay to love yourself. Like if you're not cool with yourself, who is going to be? So it starts at home. It's a whole dialogue in the beginning. Being open with the kids, always telling them that it's okay for me to say that that my daughter's beautiful, but he needs to believe it. So some of these practices, it's just like a mantra practice, which is just repeating some Sanskrit words. It can resonate in the brain and get inside the heart.
Yeah. So listen, it was fantastic having Bonnie on the show, and it was great. And I think that together, if we just keep going, we can put all the pieces together, and we can make this happen. Thank you very much, Bonnie, and thank you, Jazz. All right.
Thank you, Jazz.
Take care.
Love you.
Love you,
thank
Bonnie.
you.
Thank you.
All right. She was great. Okay, I want to thank you very much for joining us today for a live show called I'm a Heroin Addict. And I'm a heroin addict, former heroin addict with over 3 decades of being clean from a 10-bag-a-day habit. Today we have, along with my great anchor here, I call her my anchor, Jazz. I call her Jazz, Jasmine. We have this great show on family addiction because, of course, as an addict, our families suffer greatly. And I remember a quick story. I was just thinking of Matt, my guest, who you'll meet here in a minute. I remember being dope sick. And I remember walking to my house, and I was going to try and steal something. And I was dope sick, which we all know is pretty sucky, right? And so the doors were locked, and the key didn't work anymore. And my mother was in there, and she wouldn't come to the door, and I kept banging the little square glass. She came down, and she said to me, if you don't leave in seconds, I'm going to call the police. And I was like, what do you mean you're going to call the police? You're my mother. You got it. She's got to leave now. And I'll never forget walking away that day, realizing that I had nobody left in the world. Nobody left. My mother. And it did something to me. And when I think back now of how much I damaged my family from my kids and stuff, and I get calls all the time, and on families that are broken apart by this. So we're going to discuss that. Matt's a great guest here who's going to speak on his personal testimony. But first, I would like to introduce Jazz, my anchor. Go ahead, take it.
Thanks, Richie. So my name is Jasmine. I'm a heroin addict and a drug addict. I was in active drug addiction for over 14 years. I've been clean and sober for 16 months now. I've done a lot of damage to my family, and some of those relationships are still being repaired on, and it's going to be ongoing, but that's okay. Talking about being alone and having nothing, when I found my way to recovery, that's exactly where I was. When I had first found my way to my recovery in 2015, I was homeless. I was like staying in this house that was like filled with mold. There was no electricity, no running water, and I just remember being like caked in filth. And there was like a little kid pool outside that we would wash up in sometimes, but it got really gross like in the hot weather because there was no way to change out the water. And I had nothing, and my family, what I had perceived as then, had abandoned me, but really I had done terrible things to them and pushed them away. And when I came to recovery, I had felt very lonely. And what happened is I was really fortunate because I was put in this community of individuals who loved me and helped me and encouraged me to find my place. So it's really cool as we're doing this episode today on the disease of addiction and how it impacts the family. Our guest here is someone that I consider family, and someone that I've met in my sobriety and who has encouraged me and loved me and just always been there for me. And I see Matt do that for a lot of people. You are family to me, but why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jasmine. My name's Matt. I'm a heroin addict and an alcoholic. As Jasmine said, our paths crossed in recovery, which is a blessing. I feel the same way about you. You're our family. Helped me through some difficult times, but for me, I affected my family in such a negative way. I have 2 children. My daughter just turned 8. My son turned 4 last October, and because of my thinking problem and with my thinking problem, my crutch was always heroin, and unfortunately, I lost the rights to my children. They went up for adoption, and my family took them on, and I'm so grateful that...
Who took them on?
My parents, my mother and my stepfather took them on. And my dad actually has been a big part of that as well, helping financially when they needed it. But my children's mother, my current girlfriend, we're back together, but we took some time apart to get sober. But during that time where we were using together, we lost everything. We lost our children, we lost our apartment, we lost our jobs, we had nothing. And eventually we lost each other, you know, and to, like I was saying to you before, you know, like if someone had told me about 3 years ago that I would be as big of a part of my children's lives today as that they would still see me as dad, I wouldn't have believed you. I had no one left. My family as a whole, and my family, like I can just say it this way, my entire life, my family is very big. My mom has 5 brothers. We're a very big family. We're close-knit. Family get-togethers at least once a month, family dinners, everything. I wasn't part of that for at least 5 years. And that's not like me.
Right.
So to be taken away from it and to be told by my parents eventually, you're not welcome here anymore until you get the help that you need. It was the boundary that they needed to set for me to be able to go on the path of recovery. And thank God that they did that.
Talk a little bit about your kids and what that damage did to your children.
Well, fortunately, my son was young enough to not really understand it.
Right.
My daughter, on the other hand, you know, like she definitely wondered where mom and dad were. And to look back at it now, it breaks my heart that I did that. But at the same time, like I was sick. I needed help. And at that point in my life, I didn't want help. I had one solution and one solution only, and that solution was doing heroin or drinking or whatever other drug I could find if I couldn't find what I wanted. So to have to repair that relationship, it took consistency on my behalf. You know, it took me showing up once I got sober, at least when I said I was going to show up. Because there was a span of time where in active addiction, where this is after our children were taken from us, that we would have visits with our kids. You know?
How were your children taken to you? Someone called? Someone reported?
Yeah, we were reported multiple times. I mean, there were multiple overdoses at our apartment with 2 small children in it. My son was less than 6 months old. You know, and there was probably an overdose reported at least twice a month at our apartment. And
you and your wife and girl?
Yeah. And I had before my son was born, I had over 3 years sober. But I got away from a program. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped praying. I stopped doing all the things that kept me sober. And it just took all of life piling up on top of me without me having the solutions that I had in place to just turn back to what I thought would be my solution.
Right.
So I have Matt, so you're a pretty cool guest, right? Because you get to be an advocate for the suffering addict who's feeling the pain, and then you also get to be an advocate for the family who's also suffering. So you have 2 roles here. And doing what I do, I work with a lot of women. And women always tell me, like, well, I can't focus on this, or I hear all these plethoras of reason, which are very valid reasons on why they can't do what they need to do to focus on themselves. And one of the biggest reasons that I hear is like, well, I have to get home to my children. Well, I have to get home to my children. Can you share a little bit on your experience of taking a step back and focusing on you and how that allowed you to be there for your children?
Absolutely.
Great question.
I mean, fortunately, I'm in a different position. I know a lot of people aren't in this position that I was blessed with having a family that was so willing to take on the responsibility of at that time, a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old child. They were more than willing to take on that responsibility so I could get the help that I needed. You know, and unfortunately, it took multiple years for me to actually get back on the recovery horse, but to be able to take a step back and realize that I was of no help to my children unless I was able to help myself. Unless I was able to focus on what I needed to focus on, which was going to meetings, staying sober for a minute at a time at times. It was just, you know, there were times in my life where it was like a minute at a time I needed to stay sober.
Oh.
You know what I mean? And so to have like the family that was there to be able to do that for me, and even today, you know, like today I'm a little bit over 2 years sober. And
congrats, brother.
Thank you. And you know, but my parents still have my children, but it's because I'm in school full time now. I work full time, and they're allowing me to do these things so I can be able to provide for my family as a whole within the next 5 years or so.
Wow.
You know, and I'm blessed to have that.
Yeah.
But there are people who are out there, I know, who don't have that opportunity, who don't have someone that can take on their children like my family was able to do. But if you do have that as an option, as difficult as it is, and I can tell you it was a very difficult thing for me to do. And in sobriety, I was a week away from celebrating my year, and I signed my rights over to my children, to my parents. But in that moment in time, I knew that it was the most selfless decision that I could do for my children. It was the best choice that I could have made for my kids.
Right.
Because what was I going to do? Move out of my sober house and move my children into a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Nashua or Manchester?
Yeah.
Or allow my children to be in a great school district in a big home where they each have their own room,
Yeah.
you know, with a huge yard to play in,
Right.
where I can still be
Yeah.
an active member of their life,
Yeah.
where I can still be dad. You know, so I was very fortunate to have that opportunity.
But that takes tough love to do that. We talk about like what my mother did to me by forcing me away. So how would you, if you were to tell someone that's watching from your parents, you know, that are worrying about their child, their son or daughter, you know, what would you tell them?
I can tell them what I tell like my current clients' parents, and that's setting healthy boundaries is probably the most important thing you can do with an addict in active addiction, and even in early on recovery. I mean, I think that even today, even with 2 years, I think my parents still have to set healthy
I
boundaries
just think
with me.
with human beings in general.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, healthy boundaries is important. It's important to be like,
Yeah.
hey, listen, you know, yeah, you can. For me, it was my parents were like, okay, you can come over and you can visit from this time to this time, you know. And it started off with like 3-hour visits, and they wanted to see that I was showing up on time, and you know, and then it was, okay, now you can stay for the day. All right, now you can stay and you can feed them and you can put them to bed. Let's see how you handle that.
Right,
and let's
right,
see if
right.
you show up the next week to do the same thing.
Right, right.
You know, and it's slowly giving me more and more responsibility as a father, and kind of weaning me back into like that role with them. And now it's just like it's blossomed over the last 2 years into like I am dad, and thank God for my parents, because they've never once have told my parents otherwise. I've always been
So
dad.
what turned you in the, you know, you had some recovery before, you relapsed, and so what turned it around this time?
My parents setting the boundary, telling me
Yeah.
that I had nowhere else to go. Yeah, I was staying at my dad's house. I was in and out of treatment centers. I think I went to 15 different detoxes in 2015. And my dad said, January 1st, I'm leaving for business, and you can't stay here anymore after that, so you need to find a place to go. And I either was going to stay in my car or I could go to treatment. So I chose to go to treatment. And I had my mom drop me off there, so I didn't have my vehicle there.
Yeah.
Because that was my MO. I'd always be
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm going to treatment, and I'd drive myself there so I could leave when I wanted to.
Right, right.
I'd get people off my back for a couple days, and then I'd come back. Oh, I'd give some lame excuse as to why I got kicked out.
Right.
But this time my parents made it firm. They said, do you want to be a part of your children's lives? Do you want to be a part of your family's life anymore? Like I said a few minutes ago, I was very family oriented for my whole life. So to have my family say, you're not going to have us anymore, really struck a nerve with me and made me realize I needed to turn it around.
So we got a question up here for you in a couple minutes, but how did you do it? Did you go on Suboxone or Methadone or what?
I did not. I tried Methadone. I tried that, but what Methadone did for me was just provided me with not feeling sick until I got my next fix. It didn't make me stop doing anything. And if I couldn't find anything for a day, I just didn't feel sick.
It's almost,
That's what it was for me.
for me, it was almost just like, how you talked about like how your family enabled you. Like it just enabled me. I didn't have to change. I didn't have to take a look at things. Like I was still okay, or so I thought I was okay in that moment. And if I needed,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, I was still waking up every morning going to the state dealer instead of my dealer.
Yeah.
So
That's how I looked
So
at
what
it.
would you tell someone that's watching us today, or a mom or dad that their son or daughter's on methadone, because it's a hard thing, right? It's a hard thing.
Very hard to kick.
Yeah, I thought it was worse to kick than heroin, personally. But I mean, if somebody is I was on a show once on MSNBC, and I spoke out against it, and I got killed in Twitter. And my son has been on it he's got a job, his family. I mean, she destroyed.
Yeah.
She went up and down, and I apologized
And
to
around
her.
the corner too.
Yeah, it was tough, you know.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
so what would you say to those? And then Jazz has a question.
I know
for you.
people who are successful on it. I do. I know people who have been successful, who do use it the right way.
Yeah.
Me personally, it didn't work. It didn't work for me. The only thing that worked for me was abstinence from it completely. Like, I can't touch anything that's mood, mind altering at all ever again in my life. I just can't, and I know that.
Yeah.
And as hard as it was to kick heroin and methadone, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because of how I feel every day when I wake up today.
Right.
You know, but I'm not going to put anyone down who's on any type of maintenance drug. I'm not going to do it. Because if it works for that person, then by all means, more power to you. As long as you're not sticking a needle in your arm anymore, I think it's okay, you know?
So the question, Jazz, can you read that?
Will medically assisted treatment be the next big thing in treatment centers? Regardless of what is preferred, will they be forced to use it to get funding?
I hope not. I mean, I hope not.
Do you think that we're seeing a shift happen already in state-funded facilities?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Suboxone and methadone, you know,
Yeah.
MAT is it's getting more popular now in state-funded facilities. However, my personal experience is the only MAT that I really love right now is Vivitrol, because I've seen such success on it. You know, I've seen people who had 15.
Because it's an antagonist.
Yeah, I've seen people with 15-year IV
Yeah.
use it for 6 months that couldn't get past that 6-month mark, that are now sober for over a year.
Well, I'm going to tell you a quick story to Connor. So right before Christmas, I was in St. Louis. I wrote a story in the Huffington Post about these 5, in the headlines were 5 heroin addicts celebrate Christmas, and they were recovered. They were all in recovery, but the paper wanted that in the thing. So they had this great picture of them, great people, you know, all young, and every one of them were on Vivitrol. And one was taking the pill, one stopped, and so when I interviewed him, he would feel like on Thanksgiving he knew he was going into a situation, so he took a pill in the morning.
Yeah.
And when he had a dream, you know, when he had the heroin dream, he'd take a pill the next day. So they had, and I wrote it, put their pictures. They all work for the state in that program. That if someone ODs, they call you to go to the hospital. They have some type of program out there. Mm-hmm. Had their picture. I wrote what they were saying. They tried to fire him.
Wow.
The state tried to fire him because...
I'm also going to play devil's advocate because you hear of lots of success stories, but also there are so many people that don't succeed on it too, and there are so many people. So you know what I mean? Like it's not like this. In my opinion, it's just my opinion. That's all it is. It's not like this big miracle thing. You know what I mean?
I personally think that the only tried and true thing that works for me is the 12 steps.
Yeah.
If I feel like if you're using Vivitrol and working a solid program, that it can be beneficial for you. But I do feel like, for me at least, the only thing that works for me on a daily basis is my relationship with my higher power and my work in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
I
I try and stay out of the political debates, but I was just
but
like,
I'm
you guys were sitting there going back and forth, and I was like, oh, but it's not that good. It's not. There's so many people that fail miserably on it.
There
or like,
is.
I know so many people that like, just because like you can't drink or do heroin doesn't stop them from smoking crack and shooting coke, you know, or like people time it onto the days that they can do their heroin and they go get their Vivitrol. So it's insane. It's insane.
The thing that always bothers me is that how much money these cost. You know,
Right, absolutely.
and we have a free program over here.
Yeah,
That they can
it's
go.
free.
They can go. I used to go.
Absolutely free.
I used to go in the morning and at lunch and at night.
Yeah.
You know, I used to go to
Absolutely.
3 meetings a day. So it boggles my mind that we've got a way. I mentioned the word absence once to the woman who runs the Missouri, the state of Missouri, the money that the feds give her. And I mentioned that, why aren't, and just in an interview as a journalist, and she freaked.
Yeah.
She freaked. Just because you made it doesn't mean people have to be strong. And I said, I wasn't saying, I believe everybody should be able to take something, you know, because first of all, Suboxone is a drug that was made by the pharma as a detox.
Absolutely.
Not as a maintenance program.
Right.
And that's why it's a cash business. I mean, it's a great cash business, right? When you think of MAT,
Yeah.
it's a great business model. I wish I could run a bottle like that. There's no accounts receivable. You go and you pay for it and you get it, right? And so they're making millions and millions of dollars on this, and there's a free program out there. And I'm not saying, and I don't want to shame or put anybody down, but I think that we have to go towards abstinence. We have to say the word.
Right, of course. I mean, I work for and went through a 12-step program. And if I didn't go through that program, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, you would have never, I would have never gained the level of insight that I have now, and I probably, my whole perception has changed on things by doing that. But we got way off topic here.
Yeah, sorry.
We're on MAT, and the show's
Let's
about
go back to family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, family, for me, it's, like I said,
but what I want to just say for a minute, I don't mean to say, we see there's a lot of that where grandparents are raising, it's happening all over. So, right, so talk a little bit about that. Do you see that a lot?
Absolutely. There's with the epidemic that we have going on nationwide right now, there's a numerous amount of children that are left right now with parents who are addicts. And what that leaves is that the grandparents of these children are taking over and stepping in and taking over the role of parenting. And for me personally, like I've said, it's if I didn't have that opportunity and those people in my life, if I didn't have my parents, I wouldn't be in my children's lives today. My children would be in the system. I wouldn't have had visits with them. I wouldn't be dad to them still. You know, and that's, I know that not everybody has that opportunity, like I said earlier, you know, but I'm fortunate where I had that. So if there is people out there who have that opportunity, I beg you to just take the time to be able to work on yourself. And if you have a family member that's willing to take on the responsibility of your children so you can work on yourself and stay involved in that child's life, I can tell you right now, it's been amazing for my children. Because like my family always says, it takes a village.
Right.
You know,
society.
Right.
So in 60 seconds, I want you to describe from where your relationships went from an active drug addiction with your children to where they're at today.
In active drug addiction, my relationship with my children was I was physically there.
Okay.
That is it. I was physically there, and that's it.
Okay.
My body was there, and that's all. So now, today, I am dad. I call and check in on them at least twice a day with my mom to see how their day was, to see how their morning is going. I'm involved in their life. I go over and I will cook dinner, or I'll go over and I'll just have dinner with them. I take them to do fun stuff. A couple of weeks ago, they had their school vacation, and I took them to Ashley and I took them to the museum, the aquarium, for the day. You know, I got to take my son on his first train ride, and he's obsessed with trains. He was more excited to go on the T than he was to go to the aquarium. You know, I have pictures of him where he's just
dreading it. He's just so excited.
He was so pumped up, you know, and then we walk in and the experiences that I have today with them like that.
Experiences.
You know, those moments, those snapshots that I will forever remember, that they will forever remember.
Right.
That's what it's all about for me today.
Yeah.
Because I remember being a kid, and I still bring up to my parents memories that I have of being 7 or 5 and these fun things that they did, and they look at me like, how do you remember that? Because it was a great memory. I always remember those things, and I know that my kids, that I'm building those memories and those experiences with them again. you know, and to be able to do it with their mother as well, like that's just another blessing.
Amazing.
You know, to have both of us sober and being a part of their lives and getting to do these things again together when we never thought we would.
So where do you work now, and what do you do there?
I actually work for Gatehouse Treatment in Nashua. We're located on Northeastern Boulevard, and I'm the lead case manager and the medical liaison.
And you're going to school too.
Yeah,
what are you going to school
I'm going
for?
to school to become a psych nurse practitioner.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So my course load's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
I go to school full time. I work full time. So it's difficult.
You're a
but
dad.
I'm a dad. I'm a son.
You show up for people in recovery.
Yeah.
Wow, you've come really far in 2 years.
Yeah. It's a blessing.
It's a blessing.
That's amazing.
But what would you tell parents that are watching this? The one, there's a lot. Okay, it's very complex, right? But what would be the one thing you would say their son is strung out and they're taking care of the kid? They don't know what's going to happen. What could you tell them?
That there's hope.
There's hope.
That recovery is possible.
Yeah.
And to set boundaries.
Yes.
Boundaries are the key, though, right?
They really are.
I mean, boundaries are the key
Yeah.
in any type of relationship.
We teach people how they're going to treat us.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
That's
yeah.
right. And
Absolutely.
it's you know, I get calls all the time from family members asking me like the magic potion to give them, and there really isn't one. The best thing that I heard you say, and you're living it by example, is hope.
Yeah.
Because and it took a lot of balls to sign your kids over. And, you know, that took balls. And because a lot of time people say, I got to go do this for my kids. And then, of course, they don't know how to handle life. So they're back. You know, you know, the stuff I did with my kids in the car or outside the room wasn't crazy. But I want to thank you very much for coming on tonight. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
You've got an amazing story. I want to thank the audience very much. I want to thank Jazz, my anchor here. And we look forward to our next show. And thank you very much for watching us live here tonight. Thanks. Goodbye.